Hey everybody, Andy Gross with the Law Office of Andrew P. Gross. We do VA disability benefits appeals for veterans who've served in the U.S. military, no matter where they are in the world. And we also do estate planning and elder law focused on veterans in Maryland and Washington, D.C. Today I want to talk a little bit about how to apply for VA disability benefits compensation for post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, if you have any kind of potentially service-connected psychological condition, behavioral health condition, whether it be a generalized anxiety disorder, maybe it triggered schizophrenia. We've seen that happen. Could be major depressive disorder, could be some other condition. It could be any number of things. As long as it's not personality disorder, lots of different psychological conditions can be service-connected, including insomnia disorder, actually. Insomnia disorder is not a physical condition necessarily as much as it is a psychological condition. So how do you apply for PTSD specifically? Before I get into that, I want to say that all the other videos I have on applying for VA disability benefits, those still are out there, and those still provide great resources, I think. I'm biased. I wrote them. I filmed them. But they're still out there to provide help on the overall process. Now, with regards to behavioral health conditions in general, you do that just the same way that you would any other claim. You either fill out the 21-526EZ or you go online to eBenefits or wherever they move the application today, which I think is on va.gov today, but that may change by the time you watch the video. Either way, you can simply enter it into Google and you'll find it. And I'll link to it in the description here. And you start the application that way. You upload any records that you may have for medical treatment, and you upload any, and you tell the VA where to find medical records in the federal system, whether that is at a VA medical center or at a military treatment facility. And that's basically how you start that process. But post-traumatic stress disorder is a little different, all right? And it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense as to why, to me personally, but the VA wants to see just a little bit more when you're applying for post-traumatic stress. And what they're looking for is a stressor event, all right? They're looking at a stressor event to trigger the PTSD. Now, you don't need a stressor event for any of the other conditions, psychological conditions that you might have, just proof that there's a nexus to service, which is a whole different topic. So, for instance, while you may have a diagnosis of major depressive disorder while in service, the VA won't necessarily look for a stressor event for that major depressive disorder, but they will look for one for post-traumatic stress. Now, what is a stressor event? Basically, it's whatever the event or condition was that triggered or caused your PTSD or created the onset of your PTSD. And while the VA could find that stressor event simply by looking through your military medical records or military history, they often don't. And they often want you, the veteran, to submit a stressor event statement of some kind to identify what it was. So how do you do that? Well, there are a couple different ways. One is the VA form 21-0781, 21-0781. And it's a special form called the Statement in Support of Claim for Service Connection for Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. Quite frankly, you can also file it on a regular Statement in Support of Claim form, the 21-4138. And what they're looking for is what happened that you believe caused your PTSD. What were the conditions? What was the event? What was the combat incident? What was the time period? What have you? And when I'm talking about stressor events, I deserve some discussion too, because not all stressor events are the same. And we might think to ourselves as a stressor event as like as being in combat, right? Combat is definitely a potential stressor event where you are in fear of your life. Now, you might not be fearing for your life at that very moment because you're relying on your training, but you might also be fearing for your life at that very moment, or you might, after the combat is over, you might be fearing for your life. So that counts. There's also, even if you weren't in direct combat, let's say, for a lot of the veterans in the global war on terror, if you were stationed at a large base, they got rocketed all the time. And there were also VBIDs, vehicle-borne improvised explosive devices. You may not have been right there where the rockets hit, but that constant fear of potentially being there is enough to actually cause post-traumatic stress. There's also, maybe you were on maybe you had to draw your weapon and potentially fire at somebody. That can be very stressful too, even if it wasn't a combat specific. Like it wasn't specifically combat. So they largely group combat-related stressors into either directly engaged with combat or in a hostile environment where you are fearing danger or fearing attack by hostile forces. There can also be non-combat related stressors. The most common one we hear about these days involves military sexual trauma or sexual assault in the military. But it doesn't even have to be sexual assault or sexual trauma in the military. It can be any kind of physical assault. Maybe you were, this happened, maybe some of my clients, I've seen this happen, where you've been jumped by others and you've been severely beaten for whatever reason. It's not combat. It might not even be somebody else in the military that jumped you. There's also things that can cause PTSD, like car accidents or training, right? So there are, I've colleagues who had bad jumps when they were airborne, and that can cause trauma. Obviously, there's physical trauma when their parachute doesn't inflate all the way, and they hit the ground injured and get injured. But there's also trauma of the psychological trauma of suffering that injury after jumping out of an airplane while it's in flight, or seeing somebody else on the flight be severely injured, or in your chalk get severely injured. So if you've been a close witness to other these things, to injuries, even if they weren't your own, that can also cause post-traumatic stress. What they want you to do is they want you to identify these conditions and write about them on either that statement of support of claim or that statement of support of claim for a stressful event. It's also, here's another tip, if there was a stressful event and it was covered by the news, for instance, there was a news report of an attack, that can be a good event. Buddy statements and pictures and letters from battle buddies or shipmates or fellow airmen or space guardians, as the case may be, who are there, who can say, yeah, we were in this event together. Anything that can corroborate the stressor itself. The VA also should, but doesn't always, look for markers in the file for PTSD. And those markers could be, as I've seen in a number of cases, where let's say a soldier or an airman or a Marine is doing all right, and then all of a sudden their performance drops off a cliff. That is often a sign of a stressor event, and now they're compensating. Even if they've never been to behavioral health to get checked out, sometimes that can be a signifier a marker as to, hey, something happened to cause this soldier, this airman, Marine, Guardian, what have you, to decline in performance. So there are a lot of different things in the record to help corroborate these things. And the VA should do the looking in the record. They don't always. They go through files very quickly. I know the VA is trying to do better. They do have a special team just for military sexual trauma cases to look through cases and files. But in the end of the day, it's the more information to corroborate the stressor that you can give the VA, the better, right? So if you can write a statement that describes what happened to you and why or how the stressor occurred, it's a good idea to submit that to the VA with any other information that you may have. As I've said elsewhere, you can also submit buddy statements to show how your behavior changed afterwards and how it affects you on a day-to-day basis. Now, with that said, if you've been denied your VA disability compensation, or you don't think your rating is appropriate for post-traumatic stress disorder or any other psychological condition, or really any condition in general, reach out to us and perhaps we can help you appeal it or see what there is to do about your particular case. With that said, I hope you like this content. I hope you like the videos. If you do, like and subscribe, share the videos on your social media platforms and your accounts, send to other veterans who might be interested in hearing from me and hearing about these issues. Really trying to just get the information out there to help veterans understand the VA claims process a little better. any event, like I said, if you have a claim that's been denied or your rating is too low, reach out and we'll see what we can do. Anyway, till next time, take care.